Good morning, everybody in the room and everybody online. My name is Tracy Brown, and I am so delighted to be with you this Sunday morning. It is 9:15-ish Central Time, and so wherever you are around the world, and wherever you are and however your day is going so far, I am so glad that you are with us right here at CSLDallas, where we take the time to dive into the Science of Mind textbook written by Ernest Holmes, which is the foundation of our teaching. And so we go a little bit at a time, sometimes a paragraph, sometimes a page or two in sequence, so that we can each have the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into what really is the teaching of the science of mind, the philosophy, the faith, and the way of life that we call science of mind. So today we are going to do a little bit of review and a little bit of topping off on the section Freedom or Bondage in chapter 6, Man's Relationship to the Universe. We've been in this chapter for several weeks, and we've been in this section. This will be the third week. So that alone tells you there's some really meaty stuff in this chapter. Man's relationship to the spiritual universe is important to us because we spent the early chapters of the book, the first 5 chapters, really understanding the nature of spirit itself, the nature of the universe, universal spiritual laws, the nature of God. Well, however framing that makes sense to you, we've done a lot of work there. And so it's natural for us to now bridge to what's my relationship with this infinite intelligence, this omnipotent, omniscient, everywhere present, all-knowing nature of the universe itself. How do I relate to that? And that's what this chapter is about. So we're going to just do a little bit of review on page 109 and then go into 110. And in the early part of this section of the chapter, Ernest Holmes started with, we therefore arrive at the conclusion that while bondage is an experience, there is a capital R reality to which bondage is not real. So we've had that reminder that the experiences that we have that are limitations are our experiences, and that experience is lowercase r real. It's our life. We often say we move in this human experience from condition to condition to condition to condition. We leave one condition and step right into another because we are living in this physical world. Some conditions are like, hey, that's good. Hey, I'm loving that. And some conditions are, ooh, I never want to experience that ever again. But they're all conditions. We're the ones who label them good or bad based on our own socialization. So Ernest Holmes reminds us that bondage or limitation is an experience, but there is a capital R reality, or there is a divinity. There is a divine experience where bondage or limitation does not apply. So this whole section, that's what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. And how does freedom fit in? So he does talk about freedom of will, that we have choice. And some of you may know I think I was either 15 or 16 when I was participating in something, I don't know, some enrichment process. I don't know if it was at school or at church, but we had to come up with what's our motto. Like, what's your life motto? And now when I think about that, I think asking someone who's 15 or 16 years old what your life motto is either stupid or brilliant. But in my case, I'm going to call it brilliant because the motto I chose, and I remember thinking about it like, for days because we had this assignment, and it's still my motto today. Wow. So in my case, it was brilliant that they asked that question of me. But even I, at that point, was like, well, yeah, this is what I think right now. But, as I grow older, I'm sure it will change. And my motto was, and is, you always have a choice. You always have a choice. And I was not in science. I wasn't raised in science of mind, so it wasn't like I'd been taught that from a spiritual or religious perspective. In fact, I had not been taught that. I was raised Baptist, and I really loved the experience I had and what I learned, and that just wasn't one of the things that was taught in that faith system. So you always have a choice. And that's what Ernest Holmes is reminding us as he talks about freedom of will means the ability to do, say, and think as one wishes, and to express life as one personally desires. And then he goes on, and we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks. A freedom under compulsion would amount to the worst kind of bondage. The Bible says if there had been any law whereby this freedom could be compelled, then by law would that freedom have been given. And if there had been a way by which the divine creative principle could have compelled or forced humanity to suddenly appear on the scene of experience full-orbed with all the possible freedom and still be an individual, then this would have been done. But we've been created to be individual expressions, individualized expressions of all of the qualities of spirit and individual expressions of how we play that out in our human experience. And so we have freedom of will, freedom of choice. And that is what keeps us from being in bondage, and also makes it make sense that life is not preordained, that God is telling us exactly what to do and how to do it and when to do it and why. We have access to infinite options, infinite possibilities, and then within the boundaries of our own individual choices and within the boundaries of the collective choices that define the society we live in, we are able to choose whatever it is we want in order to express our unique life. So that gets us all the way through page 108 and 109. And I believe last week there was some discussion about this paragraph, the long paragraph on 109 that begins with, so humanity must be created with the possibility of limitless freedom and left alone to discover self. On this road to self-discovery, we must be subject to the law of reality, and if in ignorance we violate this law, we must thereby suffer. Now, remember, okay, so we're talking about the law of cause and effect, and we make choices, and we do things, and there is an effect, and sometimes that effect is what we want, and sometimes that effect is not what we want, so we make a new choice. Dr. Petra, a couple of weeks ago, did an amazing job talking about the section that comes before this one. The world has learned all it should through suffering. So Ernest Holmes has already addressed the fact that that's not the only way to learn, and we have learned from it. So I need to point that out because he comes back here and just makes that statement that on the road to self-discovery, we must be subject to the capital L law of capital R reality. And if in ignorance, because I don't know better or I forget how the law works, then I will violate this law of reality and must thereby suffer. This is not, however, because any divine decree ordains suffering, but simply because it is the necessity of the case. Cause, effect, right? Choice, consequence. Choice, consequence. That's all he's reinforcing here. Not that the world is designed for you to suffer and be punished, and that's not the design. But when we are out of alignment with the way physical laws work or the way spiritual law works, we are going to experience the impact of that, the consequence of that, the effect of that. I'm trying to say it a few different ways, knowing that it will connect in with different people in different ways. So he goes on to say, God never intended humanity to suffer. Suffering may be salutary in that it leads us to a place where we learn that it is unnecessary. We shall cease to suffer as we more and more comply with the laws of the universe. All suffering is the result of some infringement of these laws. But from the standpoint of the divinity within us, it's unnecessary. We recognize that we experience pain, but how could there be an eternal reality to pain? If this were true, we would have a suffering universe, a suffering God, an agonizing deity, all of which seems untrue, unreal, and impossible. So I was in a conversation with someone this week who had a very legitimate reason to be angry, a legitimate reason to feel unvalued and maybe even targeted in the situation that occurred. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking about, yes, the experience itself is real, like, tangible. It is happening in the human experience. But the story that we make up about the experience is our perception. And again, I'm not dismissing in this case because I can think of cases in my own life. It's like, yeah, it's real. And I'm right to be angry. And I'm right to be upset about this. But when we tell the story over and over to ourselves, even other people, yes, but to ourselves more than anything, right? I'm angry, I am upset, I wasn't treated fairly, then what I am doing is I am choosing to suffer. In this context, I recognize I'm out of alignment with love, peace, joy, harmony, wholeness, right? Qualities of God. I recognize that. And I keep going back to that instead of moving to the place of how do I get myself back in alignment with spiritual principle. It doesn't mean that this uncomfortable, unnecessary, I guess it's necessary because it happened, but this uncomfortable experience, it happened. It's not happening right now, this moment, unless I'm telling the story about it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Right? And so we relive it and then we create the suffering around it versus saying, I'm really mad at this person, or I'm really upset that this person treated me this way, but I can't control this person, and I am grounded in the peace that is beyond any human understanding, because I am the expression of God right here and right now. God's not mad. God doesn't feel unvalued. So if the God in me, if I can access the God in me, the spiritual presence that is my truth, and I can breathe in, then I can even tell the story about what this person did or said. And in the moment, or for the next 3 days, I was really angry about it. But right now, in this moment, I am at peace with the ever-unfolding nature of the universe, and I always have a choice. So I am choosing to accept this happened and choose what needs to happen in this day or this moment. Maybe I journal about it. Maybe I pray about it. Maybe I call a practitioner and say, would you please pray with me? Maybe I simply do meditations 2 or 3 times a day to calm my flow, to calm myself. But this idea in this chapter of man's relationship with the spiritual universe, we're being reminded right in this chapter 5, chapter 6, the first chapter, where Ernest Holmes really starts like putting us in the place of, I have a relationship with this divine presence. It is in me. It is operating as me. It is living through me. And I have the ability to access freedom because my freedom is living in principle, living guided by principle. I am in bondage when I am not living in principle or not bringing principle into what I do. So we're going to come to your questions, your examples, how this is landing with you in about 3 minutes, but I'm going to end this section before we do. At the top of page 108, he starts at the bottom of not page 108, page 110. It does say we can have what we can take, while at the same time, we must expect to experience the logical result of our thought and act, be it good or what we call evil. This is the law of liberty. We live in a law of liberty, not bondage. The meaning of freedom implies the possibility of suffering, because if we are free only by virtue of the possibility of choosing more than one course of action. There is no freedom or happiness as a spontaneous individuality unless there can be a temporary restriction or bondage or unhappiness through the wrong use of freedom. So Ernest Holmes brings it right back to each of us having individual responsibility for the choices we make and recognizing that if they bring us joy and happiness, great, make more of those kind of choices. And if they bring us what feels like negativity or evil, which I put in air quotes because we don't believe in evil as a force, then it's a choice, it's temporary, and we can change it. Last sentence in this section, 2/3 of the way down on page 110. People who spend all their time talking about their unhappiness become more unhappy. Jesus understood these great laws of cause and effect in the universe, which work sometimes with apparent slowness, but always with sureness. Eventually, we shall understand that all human bondage is an invention of ignorance. All human bondage is the invention of ignorance. Our ignorance of the law, our ignorance of the intention, and the basic principle that all has been created from good for good, or the ignorance that comes or that demonstrates as a result of us forgetting what we know about the goodness of the universe and the goodness of all the universe has created, including each one of us. So, okay, we are going to be done with freedom or bondage because we are going to choose freedom. Yes, that inside out knowing. And so I'm curious, what questions do you have? Is there something that didn't make sense? What examples do you have that are examples of how you've seen this apply in your life? We want to hear from you. So good morning, Joseph.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This conversation is getting pretty deep. I'm sure you got some questions. There's a few ways you can join the conversation. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can tap the raise your hand icon, and I'll ask you to unmute your mic and join us. If you're here in the room, there's a microphone being passed around by Patrick, and you can just use that microphone so everyone can hear your voice. If you're on Facebook, just type your questions in the chat. Without further delay, let's jump in.
Patrick, we have a question or comment right here. And in the room, please say your name. The microphone is for the people who are online to be able to hear you. It doesn't amplify here in the room. Okay, so name and what's your comment or question?
My name is Kenan Taylor. I guess I'd ask for a clarification. So you started off saying, explaining how, suffering is caused by ignorance of I guess, the universal laws and the cause and effect relationship that comes out of that. So my question kind of, and you kind of followed that up with, the negative feedback loop that results from experiencing it after the fact, which is reflection. But my question comes to in the moment, and I think about in situations where there's theft, which is the ultimate kind of evil. So, and I think more along the lines of physical theft, like in cases like, say, being physically mutilated, raped, and things of that nature. Other types of theft, like people lying to you, or deceiving you. I think those are things that are more mental, where it's possible to, in the moment, think through the pain that it caused and kind of reframe the experience you're having. But in the case of physical theft, there's no way to unexperience the pain. Like, if you're in pain, you are physically experience suffering that had nothing to do with your decisions. This is a pain that was cast upon you. So outside of that situation, once the experience is over, you can reframe it in a way to, find your peace again. But I feel like it's contradictory because in that moment you are physically suffering and it was not caused by any, action or choice that you made. So I'd like clarification.
I love this comment and question. Thank you, Keenan, and welcome. So in science of mind and in metaphysics in general, we actually separate pain from suffering. So pain, you're right, you can have a physical pain, a mental pain, an emotional pain, and it grabs you and you are experiencing it. So when I was using the example of, it is appropriate to be angry when this is happening. But if you're still angry a week later, or if you're still angry 6 months later about something that happened 6 months, then you are suffering and you are causing the suffering yourself. Because the pain happened, and in the moment of it happening, you are supposed to have a human experience of it. So all of that, the physical pain is a warning, emotional pain, it's not even warning. It's an information system. It is giving you information. Another piece of that is that I love that you use some examples related to being the target, maybe, of violence, right? So you're the target of someone else creating a situation where you experience physical pain, different from Tracy going skating and falling and having physical pain because, she's out there roller skating. I caused it myself, but someone's shooting you. Or when we, just a few weeks ago, were revisiting the murder of George Floyd at the end of May, the anniversary of that. When we talk about what George Floyd experienced, there was pain. But we separate the pain from the suffering. When we usually are talking about suffering, we're talking about the ongoing repeat of some pain that happened at some moment. So you're absolutely right. If someone shoots me and I die, then I'm not suffering. My body is dead, but my soul is still experiencing, because we believe and teach the soul is eternal. And so if I've been living my life guided by spiritual principle, I can trust that my soul is going to be like, I don't believe that man shot me. What kind of pain was he in to shoot me? And now I'm in this new experience. Hey, let's get it, right? Let's see what this new experience is, because I can't go back. And we like to think in our humanness that, oh no, I'm going to be mad at this person for eternity. But again, as in the reading, the idea of evil being able to capture a permanent part of our lives is what our spiritual principles and our spiritual practices help us separate from. So that was a beautiful kind of processing. And as you learn more about our teaching, and as we continue to study and practice our teaching, we begin to separate out. Pain is good because it teaches us something or alerts us to something. We can't be responsible for the intention of the other person who may have been mad or angry or hurt themselves, which is why they're hurting us, because we are going to reconnect in with, this is how I heal from this, and this is how I begin to realign with spiritual principle. That was meaty. Thank you. Someone else in the room has a microphone, and then we're going to come online.
Hi, my name is Darlene. from taking your self-mastery class, I made a decision to stop being in pain from family issues, birth family issues. And through that, I decided in that decision that I had a choice to how was I going to do this. And what I decided was to separate myself from my family for a time, for a reason, to look at me. And what I discovered was I was telling a story for 60 years, a story that happened to me in the womb, from the womb, that was told to me. And over the years, how I realized how I kept myself suffering was I added every painful thing to that original story. And I made up stuff, and I fought with sisters, and I had no value, and I had to stay on that course through some difficult times and events that I felt I should have been present at. But I realized that it was a love thing, not only for myself, but for them as well. So there was to end the chaos. Now, the ignorance was not only my relationship to the infinite intelligence, but the ignorance was ignorance of who I am.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the ignorance
beautiful.
of myself in relationship to the divine. And so I'm free. And that's what I understand from choice. Choice. I love that. Choice keeps us free because we don't always have to learn. I realized that every time I would hear people give this magnificent aha thing, it had to come from someplace in our life where we were suffering. We don't have to learn through suffering or God beating us down and then picking. I don't want a God like that. You don't have to. A friend of mine said, well, you just keep living, and God's going to strip you of everything. I don't need a God like that. He can go across the street, or she can go across the street, but we can learn from a place of goodness. We can learn from a place of love. And so it's important to get into the classes here at CSLDallas so you can explore and fall apart and come back together and cry and weep and do all those things and ask questions.
And laugh and sing.
And do whatever, so yeah. Thank you.
What Darlene said. And that piece about we use the word ignorance not in a pejorative way, not in a, you're ignorant, you're dumb, but we are ignorant of our relationship to the divine, that we are the divine, we are God expressing. We have all the nature, like the nature of spirit, all the qualities that we easily say, well, these are the qualities of God. Wisdom, joy, peace, beauty, order, right? Those are the qualities. Guess what? It's just like the genetic DNA. You have the biological DNA of your earth family, your parents, your biological parents, that genetic pattern. You got the genetic pattern, the spiritual DNA of spirit, of God, of the universe. It is equally in us. But most of us didn't grow up knowing that, learning it. And then once we start to discover it, we're so patterned into what we've been socialized into or what we've done for decades that we are ignorant of how to use it, how to lean into it, and how to be it. And that's what we practice with our spiritual practices, getting in touch with it, and that's what we use in order to live and co-create lives we love. Do we have anybody online?
Looks like we have a question from our Zoom audience. Marjorie, could you unmute your mic?
Great.
and join
Welcome,
our conversation.
Marjorie. Welcome, Marjorie. Hey, Richard. Richard, can I be on camera, please? Okay. Oh, we're fancy. We got multiple cameras working today, probably every week. Okay. Hey, Marjorie, what's your comment or question?
Hi, good morning. Hi. Yeah, I guess I just want to remark a little bit about this passage that we're reading on page 110, where he says things like, I've had it here. All things are possible to the infinite, but the infinite forever remains true to its own nature and never contradicts itself. And so, to me, my definition, the way I understand the infinite, is that the infinite is 100% present everywhere simultaneously. That's kind of the way I understand the meaning of the infinite. 100% present everywhere simultaneously. So the infinite in terms of how we experience here on planet Earth. So on one side of the planet, it's nighttime, and the other side of the planet, it's daytime, and they're both happening simultaneously. On one side of the planet, you might be having a hurricane happening. On the other side of the planet, you might be having a beautiful sunshiny day, and they're both happening in the same moment. So, is that a contradiction of nature? I don't know. But I do think that Ernest Holmes tends to speak in the either-or mode of conversation of his speech. He tends to say it's one thing or it's another thing. And he tends to, from my observation anyway, speak in linear terms, in dual terms, duality as we experience it here on planet Earth. He doesn't seem to speak about non-duality, about no time, no space, or about the fact that two or more seemingly opposite things can all be partially true at the same time. So I guess from my understanding about the story that we're telling, I perceive that the universal laws are infinite and they are unchanging. They are true and they are beautiful and they are good. And at the same time, our understanding of these laws and our experience of the way we practice or perceive or understand these laws can be more than one thing in the same moment. We do have the capacity now to understand that we can be experiencing something physically painful and we can be suffering, and at the same time we have a ground understanding that all is well. So those two things can happen at the same time. So I just wanted to kind of put that. It's not a question exactly, but it's just the way I perceive that. I'm reading Ernest Holmes, and I'm reading it 100 years after it was written, more or less. And I have a capacity that possibly Ernest Holmes did not perceive the world in the same terms that I do 100 years after the fact. So that's kind of what I'm kind of putting out into the field today. Thank you for listening.
So I'm so glad, Marjorie, that you are sharing that. And one of the reasons that we do go through the textbook paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter, is so that all of us can do exactly what Marjorie is doing, and that is reflect on it. And what does this really mean to me? And how am I understanding it? And we have people in the room who will probably agree with me that every time we go through, we have a deeper understanding of it because we're continuing to live and we have more and more exposure to it. So I do want to respond to a couple of observations or perceptions that you shared, Marjorie. So Ernest Holmes consistently is telling us that the universal laws are always present and everywhere present. That is one of our primary foundational pieces. And it is not contradictory in the physical realm that on one part of the earth, because if we talk about the earth or our globe, that it's night one place and day somewhere else, because universe divinity is everywhere present. It is not choosing night or day. It is everywhere present. The reason that is happening is physical law, because the earth moves on its axis and is moving in relationship to the moon, the sun, to the other planets. That has nothing to do with contradicting universal law or the infinite. The infinite is present wherever it is day, and it is present wherever it is night. The only time that gets confusing is when we think where I am is the place where God is, and everything that's happening in the world is in not comparison to, but that's the word that's coming to mind with limited time, but in relationship to what's happening somewhere else in the world. Because whoever's in Australia right now, like, they're experiencing the totality of the infinite, of universal law. So we do teach that. Ernest Holmes never contradicts that in anything that he writes. What we're dealing with now in this chapter is beginning to say, what is it that we as human beings do? And we as individual and collective human beings, we make a lot of choices. We make a lot of choices that are not in alignment with infinite or universal laws. And the reality that proves to us that God is present and that we have free will is that nothing can happen outside of God. That doesn't mean God chose it for us. So we create a lot of situations and scenarios that are not in alignment or do not result in joy, peace, harmony, wholeness, etc., etc. But that is not duality, that is in terms of spirit. That is not duality in terms of the infinite. So let's continue to dig a little bit deeper and not be guided, not confuse or conflate our human experience with the experience of the infinite or the truth of God itself. And I want to say so much more about this, but the clock says it is time for us to end our class today. So if you're in the room and you have a comment or a question, I will stick around and we can talk about it. And if you're online, if you quickly put something in the chat or if you're on Facebook, I promise I'll go back and look at it later today and make a comment related to it. Thank you so much for being with us. We are almost going to run over, but I've got to ask, are there any announcements, anything that we want to say, other than we have a workshop this afternoon, Power of Decision, with Reverend Karen Fry, and you can still sign up online or in person. We love you. Thanks for being with us, and hopefully we'll see you in the celebration with Reverend Karen Fry speaking in about 25 minutes. Bye for now.